Uh, Hello, everyone. Today, I would like to start with a quote: "All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights." This is by Roosevelt, the first lady of the former first lady of the United States. And herewith, we are starting with the today's webinar, that is Youth for Human Rights in the context of children on the occasion of International Human Rights Day. Firstly, I would like to introduce you, everyone, to Gujarat Youth Forum. And before that, I would like to thank UNICEF and Center of Excellence Gujarat University for specially supporting the entire initiative, wherein we can channelize the energy and potential of young people. So this all started with a campaign that is called Ahmedabad Fights Corona, where young people got together on ground to support the communities in need during the COVID lockdown. And during that time, we realized that there should be an alliance, a platform that should be given to young people to exhibit their potential, and in unison, they can come together and serve the community with a better purpose. So that gave rise to this concept of Gujarat Youth Forum, and with a very good support of Center of Excellence Gujarat University, we came up with this idea, which is very much supported by UNICEF. And that's how we started with Gujarat Youth Forum. And then since then, we are having knowledge series which under Gujarat Youth Forum, where we are doing different webinars, and we are getting young people on panel, and also there are young people as spectators. And then we are taking the suggestions, ideas, and aspirations to build Gujarat Youth Forum, which would be a robust organization which will give a platform to the young people of the state to present their ideas and put their voice forward. So that's how. So, firstly, I would like to introduce Sharmila Ray on the panel. So, Sharmila Ray is a child protection specialist at UNICEF India. She has done an MSc in Public Sector Policy and Management from King's College London. She has a rich experience in program management, monitoring and evaluation, capacity building, and participatory action research across child protection, gender and livelihoods, and urban policy, along with a class working exposure with the government, civil societies, community structures, women child groups, adolescent girls groups, and youth groups in multiple states across India. Secondly, I would like to introduce Dr. Sonal Pandya, who is the head of Department Communication and Journalism at Gujarat University. Her major contribution is towards institutional building and academics. Her charisma attracts most of her students while apparently teaching them human values and sensitizing them. She always carries a positive attitude towards life and lives with the fighting spirit. She has always been empathetic towards the grassroots people of the society and is a combination of sensitive intellectual and also believes in being super grounded. So thank you so much for joining us. And we would be having special address from Sharmila ji first, and then we would like to hear Dr. Sonal Pandya. Sharmila ma'am, over to you from you. Thank you.
And good morning, good evening, everybody, especially my esteemed panelists. And thank you for inviting me here to speak on this subject. It's a very dynamic cohort, the youth, and a lot depends on the youth as well. So I feel especially happy to be here addressing you on this very important subject today. Madhesh, if you could just bring my presentation in.
Sure, ma'am. Doing that. Okay.
So much today. I know that today is sort of the theme of today's webinar and learning series is the youth for human rights in context of children. What I would be focusing on is child rights as human rights and on ending violence against children and what role possibly the youth could play. When I say that, I also say it with the disclaimer that this is a vast topic, and as practitioners, we know by now how detailed these discussions have to be for on-ground translation. So I'll just leave you with some ideas with the hope that you pick up even one of them, and even if it's some effort or some kind of introspection on what kind of role we can play, I think it would be meaningful for me and for all of us. But this is the next one. So just to quickly sort of recap on what human rights principles are, the basic tenet of human rights and something that in the last few years, couple of years, there have been a lot of debates and discussions around in media and social media on the whys and hows of it, is that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, and that is all human beings. There are no ifs and buts. There are no biases. There are no I don't think that should be there. It doesn't apply. It's all human beings. Human rights are universal, they're inalienable, they're indivisible, they're interdependent and interrelated, which basically means that your civil rights, your political rights, your economic rights, your social rights, all of them are interrelated. Within the human rights framework, the basic belief and the conviction and the commitment is that it cannot be bargained. It cannot be, I'll give you some, I'll take back some. These are universal and they're indivisible. And with the achievement and the fulfillment of on the realization of one right comes the realization of the other right. If you don't have civic rights, then you will not have political rights, presumably. If you don't have political rights, presumably they will also hinge on your economic rights and so on and so forth. The United Nations sets a common standard on human rights, and the Human Rights Declaration, as you would know, was adopted in 1948. Can we go to the next slide? This slide is more about seeing child rights as human rights. Often we forget that child rights, gender rights, these are all part of LGBTQ rights. These are all part of the human rights framework. It draws from there. When we talk about child rights, we talk about how it draws from the human rights framework with specific focus and attention given to children, which is all in India, all adults who are under, all beings who are under 18. After 18, you reach majority. Till then, you're considered a minor. So till 18, and there are no ifs and buts there. It's not, from a 12-year-old, we can accept this, but if you're 17 and a half, we won't. It doesn't work like that. A child is a child, and by constitution, the child is defined as somebody under 18. Child rights, there's the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is one of the 9 main primary instruments of the human rights framework. It is also considered among the 9 core international human rights instruments. It's very important to basically understand this framework to be able to then promote, protect, and realize children's rights. I would also want to bring in here that as a legal instrument, the Convention of the Rights of the Child is adopted by India as well. India is a ratifier of the Convention of the Rights of the Child, and therefore child rights is enshrined within Constitution, which means that the principles of child rights and the basic focus of child rights within the global and human rights framework is enshrined as well in the Indian Constitution. The principles are primarily the best interest of the child. So the decisions, whatever decisions we take, legal, social, cultural, need to be in the best interest of the child. They need to ensure that the right to life is protected, right to survival and development are protected, and that the child has a right to participate in decision making according to their age and maturity, which basically means that when we make decisions for the child, it is absolutely imperative that we also include the child in the decision making process. Of course, a lot of this is also contingent on the child's age. If the child is 5 years old, there are certain decisions we might or might not agree to as adults, but the child's decision must be taken. Which then brings me, Matish, could you move to the next slide? Which then brings me to the question of violence against children. And I think the question of violence against children, if thought through deeply, is also very contingent on how much or how little a child is allowed to participate in decisions around them, how much of the child's approval or consent is sought, how much as a society and as people we consider the child as somebody who has the agency, to give these consents and approvals and participation in decision making. So the Article 19 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child define violence against children as state parties shall all take all appropriate legislative, administrative, social, and educational measures to protect the child from all forms of physical and mental violence, injury or abuse, neglect or negligent treatment, maltreatment or exploitation, including sexual abuse. Matish, can you just stay on the previous slide? I'll not go into the details of this because of time constraints, But I would definitely want to emphasize here on the importance of all forms of violence, again, within the human rights and child rights framework, being considered as indivisible. It cannot stop at, oh, I just slapped the child too. And it's not like I beat their bones out of shape, or it's not like the child's hand broke. It's just 3 slaps. That's not how it works. It's very important to understand for all of us that there are no negotiations here. When it is considered as all forms, it is all forms of physical and mental violence, injury and abuse. It cannot be that, oh, I might have harassed a girl on the street. It's not like, there were any grave violations. No, it doesn't work like that. Harassment is harassment. It's an infringement on the rights of the child, and it's a definite incidence of violence. Matish, can you go to the next slide? The different kinds of violence noted here are maltreatment, including violent punishment, bullying, including cyberbullying, youth violence, intimate partner violence, or what was previously and is more commonly known as domestic violence. There's sexual violence, which includes child pornography. There's emotional or psychological violence and witnessing violence. I just want to quickly bring in here that when we talk about violence, of course, there are legislations, and I can talk about the instruments and human rights and child rights, but violence is a very, very cultural and social issue. What we accept as violence is what we recognize as violence. What we don't accept as violence, we don't recognize as violence. There have been, I don't know how many times that we have sort of spoken to children of different kinds of groups, urban, rural, different kinds of economic groups as well, different kinds of backgrounds, communities, gender. And when we ask them if they've faced violence, almost never do they say that corporal violence or violent punishment at home is a form of violence. It is considered as in the best interest of the child. How will our parents discipline us if they don't hit us? That is generally the kind of belief system that a lot of us come from, and that needs to change. It is definitely an incidence of violence. It is definitely one of the main types of interpersonal violence that we see a lot, and therefore it needs to be addressed. The kind of impact of violence that we see on children, of course, it's an entire range, and it depends on the incidence, the gravity, the age at which the child is, who is the one who sort of inflicted the violence. All of these things matter. Stranger versus a close relative or a friend, sibling, these things matter. But in terms of the recorded impacts of violence, we have death, severe injuries, of course, impairment to the brain and nervous system. There's negative coping and health risk behaviors, of which we see a lot. I think we see a lot of this as a society, as people, as with friends, with relatives, on social media, in movies. Of course, unintended pregnancies, a lot of risk-taking behavior, alcoholism, speed driving, etc., drug issues as well, addictions, a wide range of non-communicable diseases, and impact for opportunities and future generations. And why I wanted to bring this here was to also say that, and there have been studies that have sort of indicated that if a society internalizes and accepts violence, then it perpetuates more of it. It accepts more violence and is willing to be pushed more to the wall than other societies are, because we accept it as a way of positive disciplining. It's okay to hit, it's okay to give a few slaps, it's okay to scold violently, it's okay to humiliate. And if we accept that, then we perpetuate that, and then it becomes an intergenerational thing. Madish, can we go to the next slide? We can just go to the next one. I've covered this already. This is the thought that I wanted to leave a lot of you with, and maybe at a later date sometime take this up for deeper discussion and a sort of a deeper dive. When we talk about the 7 strategies to end violence, and this is a strategy that has been developed over years by WHO, by UNODC, by UNICEF, by USAID, the World Bank, a lot of organizations that are working on this. We've also tested this out through pilots, through working with the government, etc. Is implementation and enforcement of laws, of course. It needs to be addressed legally. It needs to be addressed legislatively. India has this in place already. We have several laws in place that take a very, very strong stand on issues of violence, be it sexual, be it otherwise corporal punishment as well. Norms and values. I spoke about how, as a culture, we need, as a society, what we accept is what we perpetuate. If it's accepted, then we don't even recognize it as violence. So norms and values matters a lot. Safe environment. How do we develop a safe environment for children? Just as people, one doesn't need to be a part of an NGO or a UNICEF or an organization or the government. Just as people, how do we ensure that we are enabling safe environments for children? Parents and caregiver support. I think this is self-explanatory. I don't need to go into this too much. Income and economic strengthening. And this is again brings us to the issue of COVID. During the pandemic, a lot of people lost jobs, a lot of people's livelihoods were hit. And there have been various reports, both anecdotal as well as in terms of helplines and women's helplines and child helplines that have said that there have been increased incidences of violence when the livelihood mechanisms sort of and channels decrease and stress increases. People get more violent with women and children. That's global. It's everywhere. So how do we then strengthen economic and income thresholds of families to ensure that the right environment exists for the child? What kind of response and support services can exist? It would be a mental health services, counseling services, medical services, referral mechanisms, how responsive the police is, how responsive your hotlines are, and education and life skills. Again, this is self-explanatory, so I won't go into it. I just wanted to end with this presentation also so that as the youth with aspirations and ambitions and definite life plans, even if they're sort of nebulous right now, if you could just think through how you could help and how you could contribute, how you could mobilize yourself to then take up these issues as social beings, but also in your personal space, how you can address, identify, talk to your family to at least within your immediate circumstance and immediate circle, address these issues and ensure that violence does not perpetuate. Thank you, and I wish you all the very best. Thanks, Madish. You're on mute.
Yeah, that's how the digital life goes. Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am, for the powerful presentation and a special address. And we have young people on the panel, I think, who are inspired by the term inspire, like that's in your presentation. And definitely they are advocating for child rights. And we really look forward to do a greater impact in the community for children. Nextly, I would like to invite Dr. Sonal Pandya. Thank you.
Sharmila and Madesh, thank you very much in inviting me. And it's really, as far as the academia is concerned, child right is the issue which is transdisciplinary. So not merely from one angle, you have to see the child right issue from multiple angles. And as UN declared the Human Rights Day today, undoubtedly, I agree with Tanisha Datta from UNICEF that COVID crisis it many times convert into child right crisis. And when we talk with the theme of recover better, stand up for human rights, I think four major points that UN also highlighted, that is back better, address inequality, encourage participation, and fourth is promote sustainable development. And as I know that when we are talking about the child right, I think in higher education also, it is very much linked up with the higher education, because as far as the communication and the behavioral change is concerned, there are many stakeholders that you have to work with it. There are major 3.4 point that as a teacher of communication I would like to highlight. And first of all, we should work on the family institutions, because our family are democratic or not, these are the very basic issues. And sometimes not speaking against the elder is the basic value system in India in many times. So children or child can't raise their voice in their family. So that is the basic issue. So when we are addressing the behavioral change communication, I think we have to identify those stakeholder as well, and we have to work on the value system as well as far as the change is concerned. Second very important thing is linkages, uh, because resources versus requirement, these linkages are very much needed. So as a higher education institute head, I think I feel that our major role through research, we should try to identify the various gap, that how our families are democratic, how children can get the fear free future in houses. So these are the second step I think we should work on, that is how to identify the linkages and how to identify the gap. So the research, if we are talking about the action research or extension as well, I think these are the major core area. Third very important thing that we should work on, that is a opinion leader. So the teachers are the opinion leaders, the elders are the opinion leaders. So in communication, there is a very well-known model that media message is not directly converted into action. When people are accepting that message into action, as action, they are interacting with the opinion leaders. So in our communication strategies also, we have to identify those opinion leaders where we can talk about the child right and the basic right, human right of a child, and how to protect those rights and why to protect those rights. Because putting the rights on the paper, we know that if we cannot put into action, opinion leaders are very important. Fifth, that as a researcher and as a teacher also, I feel that one very important angle is missing in the child right, that we talk about the educational pedagogy, and we should ask, and we should be the children supposed to be the partner of the whole teaching pedagogy and all. But can we include the empathy level when while we are doing research with the children? I think we should not only be the sensitive towards them, we should create the empathy. So when I'm teaching film, so I can quote the example that it is not a process of fast forward. Child cannot be the fast forward herself or himself, but we have to remind ourselves and replace ourselves to understand the many issues. I have having a very deep concern for ICT as well, and there are number of issues which we have to deal with, because now the telephone is have taken the replacement of the parents and teachers. Your drawing room, your bedroom is converted into classroom. So there are thousands of issues has already taken place, and as I mentioned that we would like to do the more intensive research in this area. I can quote the example of the Subir Taluka Tehsil of Adang. It is having 92 villages on paper, and only 20 villages is able to children are able to get the internet connections. So in Subir Taluka, children has to walk for 3 to 5 kilometers to get the internet access. So I think these are the issue which is related with the infrastructure and basic amenities when we are talking about the digital India, and when we are talking about the e-learning. I think these are the core issues that we have to work in an integrated way, and we have to work with the empathy with the children. I think if we are really looking for the sensible citizen, I think today is the day. And as an head of an academic institute, I think there are much more area that we can include in the teaching, research and extension as far as the child right is concerned. So thank you very much to invite us. And I think we are talking about the e-learning lot, but as far as the child right is concerned, Sharmila must be agree with me that we have to do some de-learning as far as the when we are framing something for the children. So with that concern, I am concluding my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sonal ma'am. You have given some valuable inputs like balancing value system and voices is very important, and then working around with opinion leaders, having empathy in the learning process. These are some very valuable suggestions that you have put forward on this panel. And yes, we have to do some serious work to provide access to basic infrastructure for education along with de-learning. And thank you so much for putting this across on this panel. Thank you so much, Sharmila ma'am and Sonal ma'am, for your special address. And now we would like to go with the panel talk. So, as Gujarat Youth Forum is all about young people, today the person who's going to moderate the panel is also a young fellow who is PP Shreyas with us, and he's 21-year-old and is in the final year of college. And as we are building on youth aspirations, we want young people to take the leadership and be the change they wish to see in the world. So with this, I invite PP Shreyas to take forward the moderation of the panel. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. Happy International Human Rights Day. This is PP Shreyas here, the Associate Lead at Elixir Foundation. I welcome all the panelists for this special webinar today evening on the Youth for Human Rights in the context of children. This webinar is being organized by Gujarat Youth Forum, supported by CCCR PDPU, Center of Excellence, Gujarat University, and Elixir Foundation, in partnership with Yuvaha, Generation Unlimited, and UNICEF India. So, giving a little bit about what is this day and why it is being celebrated. Human Rights Day is being observed every on the 10th December, the day the United Nations General Assembly was being adopted in 1948 under the Universal Declaration of Rights, which is the UDHR. And this year's theme, the 2020 theme, is to recover better and stand up for human rights. This year's human rights theme relates to COVID-19 pandemic and focuses on the need to build back better by ensuring human rights are central to the recovery efforts. 10th December every year is an opportunity to reaffirm the importance of human rights in rebuilding the world we want and the need for the solidarity as an interconnectedness and shared humanity. The youth can preserve human rights for generations and implant the importance and value of human rights in people's heart. Youth is the nexus between the children and the adult, and the message of human rights will be only conveyed by these groups, which are the youth. Given that the youth plays a huge role in the human rights, we shall discuss today in this webinar with the panel present, which I'm going to welcome them forward today, and on how this past few months of this pandemic has impacted the youth in various sectors across the globe. So without further delays, I take this moment to introduce each and every panel speaker for today's webinar by giving a brief introduction. So our first panel speaker for the day is Harsh Rawal, advocate of Gujarat High Court and associate editor of Gujarat Law Herald. He has represented workers, trade unions, marginalized communities before the court by the way of public interest litigation and has filed PILs for the Agriya community on behalf of the Agriya Hit Rashik Manchak case for the education of the Agriya children who migrated in the desert with their family for more than 8 months. He has appeared in various litigations involving children and their rights. I wholeheartedly welcome you to this panel discussion and webinar, sir. Welcome once again, Harsh. Next panel speaker with us is Kinjal Shah. So for most of us, 30-year-olds are synonymous with taking toddler steps in their career, partying hard and leading a career-free life. Not Kinjal Shah. She took conscious decision to do an important thing at her early 18s. So she's a trustee of SASWAS, a non-profit foundation, which essentially looks into the education of underprivileged kids. Starting with 3 kids in 2008, Kinjal teaches 700 plus slum kids in 9 communities every day to provide them quality education. She believes that the only difference between them and us is the availability of resources and opportunities, and the soul lies in bridging that gap. There have been a lot of challenges in her 12 years of journey, but that does not stop her from providing quality education to the slum kids every day, passing it. For most of us, 30-year-olds are synonymous, as I mentioned earlier, which takes toddler steps in their career, partying hard and leading a career-free life. So right now, I would like to wholeheartedly welcome Kinjal Shah on the webinar, and thank you so much for coming, Kinjal. Moving on, we have with us Gaurang Raval, founder of Saurath Foundation. He works on empowering young people to channelize their energies for constructive change. He's also an Ashoka Fellow and former President Clinton Fellow. We are very happy to have you, Gaurang, on this webinar, and I wholeheartedly welcome you again. The last panel speaker is Maitreya Shah, a lawyer and disability rights activist with blindness based in India. He's a director Enable Me Access and is an IEF Internet Law and Policy Foundry Fellow in the year 2019 to 21 cohort. He is on track for the completion of postgraduate studies in law at the University of Pennsylvania, Carey Law School. Maitreya has extensively worked on the disability research and advocacy in the areas of access of justice, inclusive education, and from digital accessibility to intersectionality. He is also a technology policy researcher and has previously been a research assistant to the National Cybersecurity Coordinator, the Prime Minister's Office of India. His core interests lie in technology and human rights. I welcome you, Maitreya, to this webinar. So once again, I welcome all the panelists present over here on today's webinar. So before moving on forward, I would request each of the panelists to give an opening remark. And this panel discussion topic for 2 minutes. So we can start off with Harsh Raval, and this stage is yours, Harsh.
Congratulations, everyone, to be part of the society where we do consider the human rights as one of the fundamental things for any living human being. So the human rights are not enforceable, but looking to the legal perspective, the Republic of India ratified the conventions, various conventions, and accepted certain rights and put those rights as obligations under specific laws. So there is constitution, there are other laws which we will discuss about it. But the most shocking thing which we will be understanding is that every 15 minutes a child is sexually abused. So the instances of sexual abuses, domestic violence, when we are talking and discussing about human rights, these issues are required to be touched and required to be discussed. So I'm also looking forward to discuss these issues with other panelists. Thank you, Shreyash.
Thank you, Harsh. That was really enlightening, very good throughout to the topic. So, moving on, over to you, Kinjal. So, to open on your open remark. Thank you.
Hello and good evening, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be part of the panelist. I here just want to say that all of us know what human rights are, what they are. We are here all together, just want to make sure that we implement it to the best so that every person who is deserving gets the human right. That's all I want to say. And I'm looking forward to the discussion that you're going to have today. Thank you so much.
Most welcome, Kinjal, and thank you so much for coming. It's very true that all of us are going to learn something from each other in today's webinar and have some productive discussion out here. So, moving on next, we have the third panel speaker, Gaurang. I would request Gaurang to give an opening remark. Thank you. Gaurang, can you please unmute yourself so we can hear you? Gaurang, can you please unmute yourself? We can't hear you. Yes, we can hear you now. Yeah. So, Gaurang, are you there? Okay, I think some network issues. So we'll come back to Gaurav. Meanwhile, we'll go to Maitreya. So Maitreya, I request you to give an opening remark. Thank you.
Hi, Shesh, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible enough. Thanks.
Great. Very glad to be on this panel on this very important day for all of us, Human Rights Day. So I'm here mostly to talk about an area of work that I do, and which is somehow very crucial, because when we talk about human rights, when we say that everyone is born free and equal, when everyone has human rights, there are a lot of conventions, there are a lot of laws. Somewhere, the society tends to forget one of the very crucial groups of people that are a part of our society and that also deserve equal human rights as others, which is persons with disabilities. We somehow tend to forget that there is a United Nations Convention on Rights of People with Disabilities, and there is a Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act of India that provides equal rights to people with disabilities. So I would like to open this discussion, and we'll talk about people, children, and youth with disabilities as we go into the discussion. But I would like to open this with this fact that intersectionality is a very essential factor to consider when we talk about, you know, policies, when we talk about inclusion, when we talk about reviewing what is going wrong in the society. So when you have a person who is vulnerable, who is marginalized, the intersectionality, which is dual or multiple forms of marginalization, when multiple identities come into picture, when your person is also disabled, when the person who is disabled is also a woman or a child, the marginalization only multiplies and the issues get increasing, and with every single identity that you count. So I think I would like to open with two very important statements that would be the core of my discussion or my side of the discussion in this panel, which is one, intersectionality is a must to understand what inclusion is. And secondly, some of the things that we probably did not take care of or we ignored before the pandemic are now haunting us when we imagine the impact of the pandemic and anticipate the post pandemic changes that the world will observe. Thank you.
Thank you, Maitreya. So, meanwhile, we'll wait for Gaurang's opening remark for some time, and I would like to add on some points onto all of you what you have said out here. So, it's overall that we are all going to learn something new at the end of the day. And second most important thing is post-pandemic, certain measures haven't been taken in the right way that is impacting us in a negative way. I mean, most of the children who are suffering in the country, irrespective it is a girl child being deprived of opportunities, or irrespective of underprivileged children on the education not being given at the right pace. So I think that is where we need to see that how you all are working on it, and what changes that you all are going to do. Today the audience out there are going to hear out to us, and we have Gaurang meanwhile with us. Gaurang, could you please present your opening remark? Thank you. Gaurang, are you there? Okay. All right. So we shall move on. Meanwhile, now I will be posting questions to the panelists present over here. Okay. And also the panelists can add point wherever they feel appropriate. So if you want to add something important to what I am posting it forward, so please do feel free to do that. So moving on, we'll first start off with Harsh Raval. So, Mr. Harsh Raval, we have read reports of increasing violence against children, the ESP girl child during COVID-19. How do you think that this is from a legal point of view? And if you could throw some light into it, what extra needs to be done to protect the child and ensure that they have a right to live in a safe environment?
These are very hard times which the whole humanity is going through. The COVID-19 pandemic has uh, they have because we were constrained in a particular environment, we were constrained in our homes. So these kind of domestic this new psychological trauma, as well as this changed behavior pattern, changed pattern and behavior, led to certain kind of offenses, including domestic violence and the instances of sexual abuses. So I'll draw your attention to the law which basically governs the domestic violence issues. So the law is the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005. Now, issue is this law specifies about it defines an aggrieved person, but in this aggrieved person, the definition includes only women. The child is being defined in another section. Section 2b defines child. So child means any person below the age of 18 years and includes an adopted step or foster child. So child is not within the domain of protection from domestic protection of women from domestic violence act. So the rights which are being crystallized for the women are not there for the children's. So the functionality is not there as such. So the national conviction. As far as the sexual offences are concerned, national conviction rate for the child rape is 28.2%, and pendency of the cases is at 89.6%. And other than that, conviction rate is 10.2% and 6% in Jammu and Kashmir and in Odisha. So the issue is, first of all, people are not the children who are being subjected to the sexual offences. They might not be able to approach their parents or the person who is basically is a guardian. They might be sexually harassing them, so they don't have the place to go. So the first issue is that is the reason. Another reason is the authorities and the society is not that receptive. That empathy is lacking on the part of the society and on the on the authorities. So even otherwise, when the case, for example, if the case is filed, and we have seen the instances in the reality that see, these are cognizable offense. These are not compoundable offense. So there cannot be any such settlement in these kind of cases. But still, the complainant becomes hostile. They have this monetary pressure. They have this all kind of social, economical pressure. They try to harass the victims. So the social security with regard to these children who are being subjected to this kind of uh, offenses is not there. So as far as the laws are concerned, laws are there, but the implementation of law and certainty of punishment is not there. So the conviction rate is low. So as far as the deterrent effect of law is concerned, that is not visible as far as India is concerned. So the punishment is required. So the procedure, the punishment, the trial is required to be commenced in a manner. It enables the people to read a message from the court that they should be very cautious, and they should not do such kind of thing, and that deterrent effect can be there in the society. So as far again one another issue is, as far as the union budget is concerned, there is 4.52% budget which is being allocated to the people who are more than half of the population as children. So the budget is insufficient, and even otherwise the 0.05% is being allocated to the child protection. So this is the first thing. Second thing is sexual offenses. So there is a law, Protection of Children from Sexual Offenses Act 2012, POCSO Act. So this issue occurred after the incident happened at Delhi, the post Nirbhaya Kand. This law was also being enacted. So there is also provision of Child Welfare Committee. And also the manner and method how the investigation is to be carried out and how the child is to be taken care of while this proceeding is going on. So these are the issues we need to address, and these are the implementation of law is required to these laws are required to be implemented in a proper sense, in a proper manner, so it can be enable the people and the children and the society at large to take benefit out of it. So that is the first thing. And when we are talking about extra need to be done for the protection, so some law with regard to clear child protection officer and our this paternal mindset which we are having, that is a huge issue. Because if we are looking that even the law specifies that examination is to be done by a lady doctor. So why there is any need, specific need? Because the male of the society failed in a way, and they are the assaulters major in most of the cases. So the upbringing, the culture, all these issues have affected us in a sense that we might be tagged as the rape capital, the rape nation. So these are the issues which we need to focus on. That would be enough for
Well, Harsh, that was well said on how today the problems are quite deep into the. We look into the society as a whole. I just like to build upon what you said to the Nirbhaya case. Okay, when we talk about early back to 20 years back, we talk about a 20-year-old girl being raped, and we talk about Aruna Shambaga case. Most of them are landmark judgments that have made a history in the legal career, and these are being taught in various law schools. But today, in respect to how much ever stringent laws have been set, these problems are being faced day by day. You don't know how many rape cases are emerging in our country. So, what do you think is that free legal aid should be given to the poor as well? And how do you think the government should implement on this?
Yeah, the landmark case of Aruna Shahbag is not based on this. She was being raped, and because of that, she was kept in she was in a vegetative state. But
Yes.
the petition was filed for the purpose of euthanasia, so that's whole different case. And apart from that, free legal aid is there. As see, we are if we there is a convention on the right of children which was
Okay.
adapted and opened, which was adapted in 20th November 1989. Not just only domestic violence or sexual offenses, but there are workers who are also working in the sites which are hazardous and dangerous. So Article 32. So these are the very manifesto which speaks about what should be done with regard to rights of the children. So Article 32 also specifies about the employment. Article 33 specifies about the uh, rights of the worker, rights of the children. Article 34 specifies about that state party under. I'll read it. States parties undertake to protect the child, protect the child from all forms of sexual exploitation and sexual abuse. For these purposes, states parties shall in particular take all appropriate national, bilateral, and multilateral measures to prevent the inducement or coercion of a child to engage in any unlawful sexual activity, the exploitative use of children in prostitution or other unlawful sexual practices, the exploitative use of children in pornographic performance and material. So the rights are being there, but see, these are not enforceable, but the laws are being made. So legal rights are there, legal aid is there, but the mechanism which provides the legal aid is not sufficient. It's not child friendly. So so even when we are talking about schools or when we are talking about the courts, they are not sensitized, sensitive enough to handle these kind of cases. So there has some kind of uh, teaching or to imparting that kind of sensitivity to the lawyers also, because sometimes when we are when a case is going on and the defense lawyer asks so improper questions to the person, to the child, so they became hostile in these kind of situations. So, and these issues also impact their psychological health also.
That's right. So that's very well said, sir. How mental health is also getting connected towards this. So moving on, I have this next question being posted to you. So you yourself are a young lawyer, and what would you suggest and guide the youth on how they can uphold the human rights value? So what are the different legal provisions available to them to safeguard their rights, which they should be aware of to exercise it?
See, first of all, uh, these human rights mostly are being, they are being taken as they are, when our constitution was being created, many of those rights are a part of fundamental rights. So I'll suggest everyone to read basic, this part 3 of the Constitution of India, which talks about fundamental rights. So Article 14, which says about equality before law. Article 15 says prohibition of discrimination on ground of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. 16 says equality of opportunity of matter in matters of public employment. 70s abolition of untouchability, abolition of titles, and protection of certain rights regarding freedom of speech, etc. Protection in respect of conviction for offenses, protection of life and personal liberty. This is the heart and soul of the Constitution of India, which says Article 21 says that no person shall be deprived of his life or personal liberty except according to procedure established by law. And if there is no law, they should not be prosecuted in very unlawful manner. And there was this in directive principle of state policy, the right to education was stated, but subsequently that has been part of constitution and fundamental right under Article 21A. And Article 23, Article 24, these are very essential essential rights, essential fundamental rights. And in case of violation of these rights, one can approach to the Honorable High Court by way of filing writ petition under Article 226 of the Constitution of India. They can go to the court. They can approach a lawyer, and they can also approach the Honorable Supreme Court by way of writ petition under Article 32 of the Constitution of India. So the rights are there. So these are very fundamental rights, and for safeguarding those rights, courts as well as our law are very open for it. So they'll if anyone is having if anyone's rights are being violated, they can approach to the courts, and court will look into the matter and pass appropriate order and do justice to these aggrieved persons.
That's something which is very right. Today, the Supreme Court of India, which is the apex court of our country, is something that has the fundamental rights and directive principles, what is being enlisted and enshrined. And what is that as a citizen, we today all need to follow these as very important. And we need to see that how we can exercise our right at what point of time. And this legal education should be made in the context of human rights, especially the youth in the rural areas today in our country. And that is when we can bring about a change. Once again, I thank Harsh for throwing light into the legal perspective of today's webinar. And thank you so much on that. So we move on to Gaurang next. So Gaurang, I request you to present your opening remark, and then I post the questions forward to you. Okay, so we shall move on to Kinjal next. So Kinjal, are you there? Yeah. So are you there, Kinjal? Okay. You can hear me? Yes. All right.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So Kinjal, you have been one of the torch bearers to showcase what youth can do, and you have brought a lot of transformational changes today in the lives of many children through their work. Right. So can you please share me what is that is the common problems being faced by the children and the youth based on your experiences, what you've noticed on field and your journey? And how do you think these issues should be addressed? I mean, the key issues that we need to really work upon and rectify over it.
Right. Sure. So when we come to youth, like these are the kids, when they're young, and then when they start growing up, the issue lies when they are young. The entire issue lies is the lack of proper education. That's what we have found. So lack of proper education. So all this youth, when they are in grade 8th or 9th, we have municipality schools till grade 8th. and so they're free, but after that, after you have to study further for 9th, 10th, you have to pay the fees, right? Though it's a minimum, but then you still have to pay the fees. So what I've majorly found is like parents are ready to teach the kids till 8th since they don't have to pay the fees, but right after when they have to pay the fees, a lot of kids drop out after grade 8. And what the parents feel is that what I say is it's kind of a circle, okay? So when they're growing up and when they don't have proper education, there are a lot of kids who are in grade 10th and they cannot pass the exams. So what the parents feel is like even when the child doesn't clear the grade 10th, he or she is going to flunk it and has to join what work I am doing, maybe labor work or the grocery shop or a rickshaw driver. So what they feel is, why am I wasting my 2 years more in earning the money? So what they'll do is they'll ask the kids to, start earning money right after grade 8 or maximum after grade 10th. Because what you've seen is while they're growing up, they have a lot of, there's a huge gap. Kid in 7th, 8th standard are also doesn't know how to read and write basic alphabets or even numbers or kakko. So when they come in grade 10th, according to our system, they pass the exams till grade 10th, but after they promote them. But in boards, you cannot pass, right? So then there's a majority chunk who flunks and then they start working. So what we have usually found is that after 10, they hardly get a job of 6 to 7 thousand rupees a month. Any job it is, whether it's kind of office boy or as a receptionist or even as working as somewhere. So this cycle continues that they earn just 6 to 7 thousand rupees a month. They are not 10th pass, and then and then there's no progress in life, right? When they're not they're stuck up with earning just 6 to 7 thousand rupees. So then again, after, so I wouldn't say the problem is unemployment. The problem is that lack of education, which gives them less money. Now with money of 6 to 7 thousand, they are married at an age of 17 to 18, and after they get married, they have kids. So it's very difficult for them to run a family with just little amount of money. So I would say all these problems of poverty, illiteracy, employment with less salary are all interlinked. So what we can do is, what we have found out is, just by educating them or guiding the parents in a proper way, that you have to just see a long term goal, that if you make your child study furthermore, they are going to earn better. If they're educated, they'll be able to serve family in a better way, and hence that all these problems of illiteracy, poverty will be reduced, if just by adding a few more education to their life. So that's what we have found majorly. And once you don't have you're not educated, and when they don't have work, they're just loitering around here and there and creating more of what we call it nuisance and all those things. So yeah.
That's right. So,
Mm,
today, when I also go down for a walk every day, I
mm,
see that a vegetable vendor's son is working and studying at the same time.
mm,
He
mm,
might be
mm,
doing his MBA and part time is working in the morning to earn,
mm,
because he's trying to
mm.
support his parents in whatever his capacity is.
Yeah,
But at the
yeah.
same time, we see kids today at a younger age, especially they're supporting the small business of their parents. Right. So, do you think this is a negative perspective we should see, or a positive, or maybe we should say that this is that the child is gaining experience at a
Mm,
very young age towards the
mm,
work,
mm, mm.
would really help him in his education, him or
Yeah,
her.
yeah. So what I really think is, I wouldn't deny them to work with their parents if it's just for a couple of hours, because considering the scenario, they do need more hands to earn money and make sure that the family runs. So what we do is, we don't discourage them to work, but on the same side, we also have to make sure, and we also tell them that you don't have to make this your career. You have to study, you have to make sure that you study till college, be graduate, so that your opportunities open up. And meanwhile, you can definitely gain this experience by, and also when if at all we discourage them to go to work, that it's going to backfire. Because when parents feel that they're not supporting we're not supporting them to work with them, it might backfire. And also may at times have happened that they doesn't send the child to study, because they feel they're coming in our society and breaking our rules, that what we have been doing since quite a long time. So I think
Right.
we should not discourage them only if it's for a couple of hours. So meanwhile, child can also get experience, but then also you have to see that you you keep on counseling them for better opportunities and what the future is them if they give more time to education and graduate. Yeah.
Right. So the message being posted by Kinjal shouldn't stay just within the four corners, right? What is being conveyed. But people who are watching this webinar on Facebook or live anything, but please just ensure that if you're a parent or a child, just keep this in note that this is something that you are trying to support at the end of the day for what parents have done, because at the end of the day they are the ones who are working hard for you since your
Yeah.
childhood. That's the most important thing. So to add on to one of the previous points what you had mentioned today, child marriage is something that is completely
Hmm.
irrelevant, and it is not
Hmm.
supposed to happen in our country when we have the legal provision being set up. But we can still see that the culture is something that is binding it in a negative perspective at the end of the day, right? And there is a very potential stigma that is associating it. And what do you think that this is something, is it like prevalent today in your journey, what you have seen, or do you think like is it reducing? And as you mentioned earlier, like the ones who get married at a young age are being abandoned from their family and not being supported with the basic financial support as well. So could you please put forward to your points on that?
Yeah, yeah. So, no matter whatever the legal age is, we have seen kids who, get engaged at an early age by, let's say, 15 or so, and we have seen them, they get married at an age of 17 and 18 as well. Even the kids who are studying with us right now, we have also seen in that they definitely get engaged when they cross 10th grade and they're forced to marry after 3 4 years of being engaged. So, and it's everywhere, it's everywhere wherever we have seen it. So I think it has not reduced at all, but meanwhile what and we have tried to stop this as well, like in our early ages when we was teaching them, it was we tried talking to the parents, we tried to the family members, but then what has happened that they live in their own community, it's kind of a whole world inside with them. So if you try to stop them, it definitely backfires, and they say that how come
Right.
you can come in our community and tell us that when should we get our kids married? And for them, 22, 23 for a girl's age is old. So what they feel is that if the girl studies till college, and what if she doesn't find someone to get married, and after 22, 23, there's no one in the community who would get married to her. So if you go and stop them, it feels like you are going as an outsider and asking them to break the rules what they have been following up since hundred of years. But as I mentioned, like the work thing, that you cannot stop them. The same way what we have been trying, we have changed the approach. What we have been doing this, okay, if you want to get engaged, do that, but then make sure that you don't stop educating your child. If they have to graduate, they have to make sure that they have a good job and they are earning, then only it's okay if they get engaged. And the other way around is, if you cannot convince the parents, you have to make sure that you start convincing the child from an early age after they cross 8 and 9. If it's a girl, you make sure that she doesn't conceive at an age of 17 or 18. You have to teach her all those things, so that even if they get married, they don't have a child right after they are married. So I think one is we have tried, but we have not successful enough. If there is anyone who can support us or tell us that how to do that, we are open, we are happy to how we can stop this. But if you cannot stop this, make sure that education doesn't. So now we have girls who are going in college as well. So that has changed. That change we have seen. Earlier, they didn't allow them to study after grade 8, but now we have seen girls are going to college as well. So now once they're educated, once we have taught them, they'll make sure that the next generation, the kids they'll come, they won't be illiterate, or they'll be properly nourished. So these are the changes that we have seen in them. Yeah.
Right. So it has really marked a very important milestone on what changes have been brought about. And the work you have been doing through Shwas is really commendable, to be honest. So since we are on the same stream, and we were discussing about the girl child today, right? Today, when we talk about girl child post pandemic or before the pandemic as well, okay, they were always being denied and deprived of opportunities, irrespective when it came to education, irrespective of things when they had to face problems. And this was not something which was common in the rural areas, right? It was always in the urban part of it as well. And how do you think today, if we as the youth need to break the myth and stereotype about gender, make them understand the difference between what is sex and gender, and what difference do you think to ensure that the girls should have a wider participation and an opportunity to study and grow in life? Because beti bachao beti padhao, that is what we learn from
Hmm.
different
Hmm.
organizations. So I'd like you
Hmm.
to put your points on that.
Yeah. So as I mentioned that all this what we say, all the parents are eager to teach the girls till grade 8 because it's free, but after that if you have to pay the fees they are very reluctant, and if they have a boy and a girl they'll make sure that the boy goes to study, but then they won't allow the girl child to go. So it's so what we have been doing is that we're trying to support more for the girls education by sponsoring their fees, so that even if the parents are denying or giving money as a problem, that we can take care of. So that's one, that how we can as an individual support their fees by school fees by making sure that their studies are not hindered. And another is like what we can do is makes girl empower, because if they'll be empowered, if they're on their own, they won't have to suffer all the other problems, may it be domestic violence or what the what other problems they face at home. So other problem is how we can, other thing which is how we can empower. Also one thing which more we face is that they're not allowed to go out of their house to work. So there are only 2 to 3 major things like stitching or a parlor course that they have been doing. So one thing which we have to face and break is that how they can allow their girls to go out and work somewhere else. So that we have been working upon, so that the more opportunities are there, and that can only be done how we can educate the parents and make sure that it's absolutely safe for your girls to go out and work. So that's, and to be honest, it's still there. It's still prevailing, and all of us are trying to figure out how to overcome that. Of course, it's a very slow process, but two things which we can do is sponsoring more of girls' education, and other is finding ways to empower them. So I think these are the two solutions of to it. Yeah.
Right. So we all get back to this quote, what reminds us that what has happened is something that we cannot get back to the roots behind it. But we
Yeah.
can see how we can make the future change by setting out the right perspectives. And we can see that people like Kinjal today are not only helping the kids over here in ensuring that the opportunities are being deprived at every element, but at the same time ensuring that a man and a woman is something that comes out of a boy and a girl in their early childhood. They are equal. They are always considered equal in the society. And never feel that if your girl is being born in your family, the girl is also called as the man of the house at the end of the day. And a girl can do anything or everything. It's not just the boy. So that's when we all have to set our perspectives in the right thing, that all of us are equal. And then we can see that the change is being created. I mean, today it's not that we cannot create the change. If we can create the milestone 5% change, which starts off with our basic household. So it's always starts off with the house, with the parent educating the child in the right way and the child getting it educated. Because at the end of the day, is what education is going to be passed by the child to their grandchildren, and then the future of the generations. So thank you so much, Kinjal. That was really nice on how you could put forward the various points on what you're working, and I wish you a very happy best towards what work you're doing, and a happy
Thank you.
volunteer with this International Human Rights Day. So moving on, we have the third panelist speaker with us, Maitreya Shah. So we have been eagerly waiting for Maitreya's note today. So, Maitreya, you have been a disability rights activist and have been vocal about it. So, my first question to you is, could you please share on the rights of differently able child and youth, and what kind of challenges they are especially facing in the past few months during this pandemic?
Hi, thank you, Shreyas, for a very important, very pointed question on children and youth with disabilities and the impact that they have been facing in the pandemic. So I will go back to a statement that I made uh, when I gave my opening remarks, which is the things that we probably ignored or we didn't take care of solving before the pandemic are now haunting us. So to start with, uh, for any policy or for any intervention in the society, you at least need to know who your target group is or who your population is, what is the population size. With persons with disabilities, the World Health Organization says that 15% of the world population is disabled. And with a country like India, with a country like ours, we have a lot of malnutrition, we have deficiency in healthcare services, issues of accidents, and a lot of these things. This number should only go up. But according to the Indian government, and that is successive governments, only around 2 crores of the Indian population has disabilities. So the number is grossly understated and underestimated. So to start with, when you say how many people or how many children or youth with disabilities are impacted negatively during the pandemic, I don't even have numbers to make an assessment. So that is the very first point that I'd like to point out. You know, we talk about human rights, we have laws, we have policies, but we don't even know how much our population are we talking about. That is the first. Secondly, when you talk about children and youth with disabilities and the challenges that they have been facing, I have three broad points to amongst a lot of challenges. I have three broad points to make here. First is children with disabilities are more vulnerable, because a lot of my fellow speakers have pointed out the vulnerabilities of child. They are vulnerable to violence. They are vulnerable to sexual offenses. Child labor. The families are not protective enough. So these challenges only multiply and the magnitude only increases when you talk about children with disabilities. So with someone who has disability, when it's a child, the dependency on caregivers, on families, and on guardians are in multitude of proportion. That's just no level that I can imagine. And when there is a lot of dependency, there is also room for abuse. So children with disabilities have been prone to a lot of abuse from their caregivers and their families. And especially in times of pandemic when everyone were locked inside their homes, I can't imagine what would the plight of children would have been. And for a lot of time now in India, children with disabilities at least found some comfort in special schools that they were sent to, or shelter homes or adoption centers they were sent to. But during the lockdown, the government had shut down a lot of special schools also, and all the children with disabilities were sent back to their families. And just imagine the plight of these children, where their disability is considered a stigma. The family is not ready to accept the child and the child's disability, and they have to live with that family for months and months in a household. And when you are also poor, the challenges are unimaginable. So I guess this is the first issue that I think is, abuse of child safety protection, which is been lacking and something that we haven't been even able to record during the pandemic. Second broad perspective is accessibility and inclusive education. I'm taking both of these points together. So when you talk about, today, a lot of us are saying that this age of internet and digital resources has been a boon for us, because in times of pandemic we were able to connect on our Zooms and Google Meets to people on Facebooks and WhatsApp. But for someone who is disabled, these platforms are not even accessible, a majority of them. So when your schools are turning to virtual classrooms, and when your universities are turning to virtual classrooms, you are actually excluding a major part of your population, because none of these platforms are accessible. So the teacher is teaching online, but the child with disability is not getting it. So there is no inclusion there. accessibility is also important in terms of the information that is being circulated. In terms of times of COVID, you have a lot of information about health, about vaccine, about the spread of virus, and a lot of these things. But all these information is not provided in an accessible format to people who have varying forms of disability. If you are deaf, you need a different level of accommodation. If you're blind, you need a different level of accommodation. And despite there are laws providing this, you don't have the implementation. So you don't have education that is inclusive for children with disabilities and youth with disabilities. You are completely excluding them. And then the information that is being made available in the times of the pandemic, which is, I would say, leave aside other information, basic healthcare, you are depriving them of even that. So you are making them vulnerable to multiple things right now. And my third broad point, when you specifically asked about the impact of pandemic in the past few months, is that children with disabilities, especially children with severe disabilities, some say something like thalassemia or hemophilia, they require a lot of medical attention, or say multiple sclerosis. You have to have multiple blood transfusions in a week or a month, and when you have spasms or you have a lot of health issues that you need to go to the hospital or your local doctor, you need to get treatment. Some of them have to get treatment on a daily basis. Some of them are dependent on caregivers. But because of the COVID-19 pandemic, all of these health services took a back seat. Because COVID was a priority for all the healthcare facilities, all doctors and medical staff, rest of these things which have been very crucial took a backseat. So we, during these past few months, on a daily basis, we used to get complaints from people, concerns that they were not getting blood transfusions, they were not getting the healthcare that they needed, and their disability was only worsening. And some of these disabilities are also connected to the basic immunity of them. And just imagine, if you are not taking care of the disability, you are making them even more vulnerable to COVID. So I think I would, sum up these in these three broad points. First is abuse, and that includes violence and sexual abuse as well. Second is accessibility and inclusive education. And third is access to healthcare. These are the three basic challenges, Shreyas.
Thank you, Maitreya. You really put forward in the right elements in covering everything forward. But I would like to post one example today on what you had said. So today, when we talk about disability, it is not that they should be ignored. It's a problem at the end of the day. And I have seen people who are doing, especially with relating to the current pandemic. Okay, we talk about sign language. Okay, people who are deaf and dumb, people are taking trainings for their companies virtually so that people could learn this basic sign language to implement it to people who can help during social service by helping out many people. So I think we can move on to the next one. And I think if I would say that if we can create a more of an inclusive society for all, and as we had mentioned earlier, how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted their learning opportunity today. And can you please share a little bit of brief on that? Yeah.
Right. So a very valid point, you made about sign language interpretation and people are learning, which is, I would say, is a welcome move that the society is getting more sensitized about the needs of people with disabilities. And to your question about making the society more inclusive, again, the point that I made in my opening remark, you need to understand what intersectionality is, what dual marginalization or multiple marginalization is. So you can't have an inclusive society unless you are talking about everyone in the society. So you can't just talk about a particular group of marginalized or you can't talk about challenges of a single group. You have to talk about everyone. So in that sense, I guess I would put disability in the first, because even after 40 years of disability rights movement in India, it is an untapped sector, and it is not an exaggeration if I put it like that. So you have around, I would say, around 15 crores of your population, and this is not I'm still understating. So 15 crores of your population is we are talking about them, and we are talking about their challenges and their rights. So if you ignore them from all the policies, you are not actually going towards an inclusive society. I'll give you a very I'll give you a few examples to illustrate what I'm saying and how we can be more inclusive. For example, a fellow speaker was talking about sexual abuse of girls with
We are having your voice breaking. I think some network issues. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
We
Is
have,
it good?
it's voice. I think you're having some connectivity issues on that. So I think we're having some issues with Maitriya's network, apparently. Let's keep the
Can you
conversation
hear me
going
now?
before.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
I can hear
is
you
that
now.
better?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I switched
Right.
on my Wi-Fi. Yeah, right. So I was saying that some of my fellow speakers were talking about, say, for example, child abuse or sexual abuse of girls and children. So if I talk in that context, you have the POCSO Act to protect children from sexual offences. You have your IPC CRPC to talk about women and girls that face sexual abuse. But
Right.
a lot of these laws and the implementation is not inclusive for people with disabilities. So your police is not sensitized, or judges are not sensitized. A lot of times what happens is a child faces sexual abuse, but the child is not even able to communicate what happened, because there is lack of appropriate training. The police is clueless about how to record a statement of a child who is disabled. So there are multiple challenges, when we talk about inclusion, and these challenges would move across domains and across sectors. You talk about domestic violence, you talk about the national education policy, you talk about healthcare. So I would say, this approach of taking everyone together and focusing especially on people who have been left out for decades and centuries now would be a right step forward in making the society more inclusive. To particularly end, answering your question.
Right. So, Maitreya, as we had mentioned about the National Education Policy, the NEP, which was introduced this year, right? And when we talk about that, we talk about the holistic education that is being implemented in our country, right? That everyone can have access towards it, that even a poor person today cannot go abroad and study, but he will get the right education over here. Yes. So, how do you think that is there that the NEP is going to have some positive implications on the disability group and going to benefit them either ways?
So Shes, this NEP to the 2020, which has now come, it has a lot of positive points, definitely, for students with disabilities, for children, for youth, as compared to the previous policies that we had. So this is for the first time that the government has shown an intent to harmonize the policy with the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016, and to harmonize what we call education and disability. So till now, what happened was, Ministry of Education or Department of Education that was managing education in India, and Ministry of Social Justice there that was managing disability affairs in India. Both of these had no marriage. They were not harmonized. So the policies were not addressing both of these things together. But now at least the NEP is trying to do that, and it has talked about proper teacher training for and training of special educators to teach people with disabilities. And it has talked about inclusive curriculum. It has talked about making schools more accessible to children with disabilities. But there are also, some of these things that the policy has not addressed at all, which is, for example, higher education of people with disabilities. See, in our country, less than 1% of people with disabilities that attend schools actually make it to colleges. So, according to a UNESCO report, 75% of children don't even, 75% of children with disabilities, sorry, don't even go to school. So out of the 25% that we are talking about that actually make it to schools, only 1% of that actually, goes to the higher education and makes it there. So we are talking about such minuscule figures and such, despite having 5% reservation in all higher education institutions managed by the government, the numbers are still these bad, and your successive policies have failed in addressing them. So I think it's a mixed bag approach, Shreyas, because we do
Yeah.
have the policy which has progressed from the previous one, but we still have a lot of things that are need to be incorporated to make it a holistic document.
Right. So that's something very well said. And today, if we talk about this issue of disability, we can say that they shouldn't be ignored, as Maitreya said. And what has happened in the pandemic has happened, but we can bring about a change right now. And one more thing is, Maitreya is the example who has created opportunity for himself. From today to do his legal education and also work with the Prime Minister's office is really an amazing thing. So thank you so much, Maitreya. So we shall have now Gaurang on the panel now. And Gaurang, we are having you to present your opening remarks, and then I post the questions forward to you. Okay. So we just lost Gaurang for some time. Meanwhile, I think we should move on. So, to all the panelists present over here, okay, I would want, if there is anything that you want to add points to what your fellow panel speakers said, please do unmute yourself and say thank you. So maybe we can have Harsh giving this one on what this how this webinar as a whole was, that we focused on everything irrespective. When he threw light into the legal perspective, we had Maitreya talking about the disability, and Kinjal on girl child education and education of different kids. So Harsh, can you please say on what is that you want to add some important points to your fellow panel speakers out here? Thank you.
Each of these issues require, uh, a proper discussion. So these are very, these are this issue, human right of children is itself, you have to, you cannot take holistic approach. You have to individually, dissect it and then discuss about it, and then only we can come to some conclusion. There are psychological element involved, legal, social, cultural. So religious also. I just want to, you know tell you about this incident which I've experienced. There was a girl. She was 13-year old, and she belongs to a Jain religion. So I was in touch with someone who was familiar with that girl. So due to some family issues, she was being forced to take sannyas. So she was going to be a monk, and she never wanted to be a monk. The reason was the family wanted to keep her out. So instead of killing someone, they were forcing her to take sannyas. And this is real incident. The father, mother are fighting over the right, the issue that who will pay what for the children. Even just Maitreya was discussing about the issues of, the blood transfusion, and the people who are suffering from thalassemia. Children are suffering from thalassemia, and yet, the father, mother are fighting over the amount. These are the issues. These are the real life issues. So we can also, just empathy is enough. That would be my observation.
Right. So I think we were missing out Gaurang's talk in today's panel, which made it quite incomplete. I felt. Gaurang, are you there? So can we have you putting forward? Okay. All right. So I think there is some very bad network issue that is not lucky for us. But I think this is something that today on what we discussed, okay, the outcome of what is that all of us, what you shared, irrespective, Kinjal shared, Harsh shared, and Maitreya shared, it connects somewhere or the other, as Harsh had mentioned. And that is where we need to say that the change is something inevitable. And I would like to put forward this question to all the panelists present over here. Okay, some key recommendations which I want you all to put forth and suggest that can be involved in today's webinar on the youth in human rights preservation. So, what do you think should be the effective media to communicate this message? We can have one of the panel speakers unmuting and giving this answer.
Yeah.
Okay, we can have Kinjal. Yeah.
Yeah, so what I really feel is that we have made human rights, but I think not a lot of people who actually need it are aware about it. So जिन तक पहुंचनी चाहिए राइट्स वो पहुंच ही नहीं रहे, उनको पता ही नहीं है, उनको ये भी नहीं पता ओके दिस इज ह्यूमन राइट्स जैसा भी कुछ होता है. So I think what you mentioned about how the first thing is how we should make aware them about what are human rights, and for that no matter what medium we need to use it, we should each and every medium. And nowadays it's so fast with the smartphones and TVs and coming around, and everyone is so aware about it. So I think the easiest way to implement is have a list of things that these are the human rights which you should be you which are eligible to, and then just and that will be when we will win. Just by forming it and not implementing is the forming is the first part, but implementing at its best is the second and the most important part. So I think once we're able to achieve that, each one of us are able to achieve and make sure that in every aspect, if I'm working for education, for me giving them all the rights to education, so whichever field we are working in, and make sure that their rights are there for the right person, I think that will win. And for that, any medium that we need to use,
That's right.
we will use it. Yeah.
Most important thing, as Kinjal said, is the implementation at the end of the day. And we see that irrespective of what we're doing is something that just not the knowing about the rights is important, but to make sure that how it is reaching out at a wider range and putting it forward in the right steps forward. So, Maitreya, over to you as you wanted to put forward. Maybe you can put on Kinjal's talk and also on the same question which I had posted earlier.
Right, thank you. So I think youth and human rights, so my recommendation would be that youth with disabilities should be included in whatever we do, in all our efforts, in all our interventions and policies. And when I say included or their participation, it is both as the beneficiaries of the change that we are making and also as the source of change that we're making. So in whatever, if we have a smallest of an organization, like which is like, say for example, Enable Me Access that we have, or you have Gujarat Youth Forum, we can adopt inclusive policies in whatever work we do. When we are working, say, on some awareness initiative in amongst the youth or children, we can include a disability as a part of it, and we can include that aspect of disability human rights within the work that I do. And on the similar lines, we can also include more youth with disabilities in the work that we do. People with disabilities are not just beneficiaries. They are also the change agents in the society. So we must recognize both of these elements. And inclusive approach is the way forward. So I think, yeah, this was what I would like to conclude with.
That's right. That's very important. And all right. So next we have the second question, which I'll make it quite quick for the panelists present over here. where do you think we should start today, and how you think after today's webinar, if people are watching, and especially the youth are the major, and in fact we being the youth, how do you think we should play an important role in it?
Educating and sensitizing the masses is the most is the vital instrument which can aid which can help us in this kind of fights. So education, empathy, to evaluate what kind of problems we are having and how to execute those how to remove redress those grievances, that should be our focus. And specific laws with regard to protection from protection of children from certain kind of domestic violences should also be there in some piece of legislation.
That's right. And we shall see that for today's webinar, what we have discussed, we shall see the positivity in the change in the upcoming days, what we can bring forward within us. That starts off with us who are discussing about it. And then this sets out on an influence. When we talk about influence today and sharing it with people, let's share the positive vibes and the positive things that we want to create change in the society, whatever is in our capacity. And with this note, I'd like to conclude this panel session, this amazing one on where we could all share our deep insights. So I would request Sharmila ma'am to share a quick insights on this panel. And ma'am, you could put forward what is that you think we all have made in today's discussion, and please share us some deep insights into it. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to congratulate all of you and the young panelists for the insights you've brought. I was just telling another colleague actually on WhatsApp that, we've been working in the sector for a really long time. So we internalize and we sort of take for granted a few things. But when I hear young people like you discuss these issues and bring in so many fresh perspectives with the kind of honesty that you do, not bound by a lot of heavy norms and protocols, it's definitely very, very refreshing, and it's definitely very heartening and very encouraging to hear that. Some of the key things and all the discussions were of course really interesting, and all the panels were. Some of the key things that I would definitely like to recap for everybody's attention once more is the question of disabilities. I think Maitri put forward some of those issues very, very eloquently and with a lot of depth and passion. B is looking also, when we talk about child rights and the issue of violence and these other issues of protection, etc. When we talk about children, we also see them as beings with agency. They're not beneficiaries. They're not on the receiving end only. They also have an agency which they exert. Until we accept that, until we work with that, until we promote, encourage, and channel that, there would always be this inherent tendency to sort of take offense at aapne aise kaise bol diya, bacche ho. There's this attitude that goes around, and it's important to take cognizance of the child with agency when we talk about child rights. The third very important point that came in was about how, when we talk about human rights and child rights, sometimes we get caught in echo chambers. A lot of us, we're talking to each other, and our thoughts and convictions, of course, strengthen, and then we go to the field and we talk to people, and suddenly we realize that people, the question of rights, there have been so many engagements with children and adolescents where I've asked them, do you have a right to participation? And they say yes, because they've been told you have a right to participation. And I ask them, what is participation? What does it mean in your life? And they sort of flounder. So I think we need to move with these three primarily, and of course, engage with children and understand human rights and the non-negotiability of it, as well as see children as upholders of rights, and see ourselves and the role that we play in it to be able to take this piece forward. Thank you. Really, thanks a lot.
Thank you, ma'am, and how you could put forward in a nutshell and summarize it as a whole on what discussion really went well. And I would say one thing before we move on to the end, that is the vote of the tanks. The change is that we create the definition. So you're the definition for change at the end of the day. And the change is that you inspire them through your stories, and how you create change, what matters at the end of the day. So with overall regards to that, I end this moderating session from my end, and I request Krunal to give the vote of thanks for this webinar today.
Thank you so very much, Shreyas. Hi, this is Krunal this side from Elixir Foundation. I'm a project manager at Elixir Foundation and also a member of Young People Section Team Yuva UNICEF. I would like to give this vote of thanks, and on behalf of Gujarat Youth Forum, I would first like to thank our partners Yuva and UNICEF for their amazing support and continued support in all our endeavors, and also to our supporting organizations, that is CCCR, PDPU, Center of Excellence, Gujarat University, and Elixir Foundation, who is all time ready to support all our ventures and 24/7, 365 days standing by us. So thank you all of you, and I would also like to thank Sharmila ma'am. Ma'am, thank you so very much, because your full form for Inspire really inspired us. And thank you, Sonal Pandya ma'am. You aptly said that value system brings changes, and I seriously believe that yes, it brings the changes. And I cannot live without thanking our panel members, Harsh Rawal ji, Kinjal Shah ji, Maitrey Shah ji, and Gaurang Rawal sir, because you all have worked on ground for these things, for the human rights of children's, violence against the children's, everything you have worked and you have experienced the thing, and you are saying it. So coming from your side, it is really very inspiring, and it is really very honest opinions and honest comments. So really thank you for being a part of this panel discussion, and thank you for sharing your amazing insights. GYF is really proud to have a dynamic panel like you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.